Okay, we can begin.
Great. Thank you, Deb. My name is Dave King. I'm retired from 40 years or so as an ACE member. I began in ACE in 1976 as at Oregon State University. I spent some years at Purdue and then came back to Oregon State and retired just a couple of years ago. The ACE leadership asked me to introduce Tristan today, but introduce him with some level of context about the Hermance speaker. Gary Hermance was the president of ACE in 1992. He basically came in right between me in 1991, 92, and Linda, and as it turned out in 92, 94, Linda Benedict and I were good friends of Gary. Gary and I talked a lot. You know how it is as ACE members in ACE leadership. You move through the ranks for about 4 years together. And, you know, Gary and I connected a lot during those years. He was a graphic designer at the University of Florida. I was a videographer and filmmaker, science writer at Oregon State University across the country. But ACE offered us the opportunity to link together quite a bit, and we did. We talked a lot about, you know, it takes a village to run an organization like this, and we pulled from various places and people. We talked strategy, we talked innovation, we talked future vision. We actually talked a lot about challenging the membership about you know, why they do what they do, why we do what we do, how we do it. You know, what is innovation? What is creativity? How do you get to you know, where you need to go as a professional? He was extremely clever, very funny, innovative, ceasingly optimistic all through this. And in the 1992 meeting, he took over as president, and I stepped away. I handed him the gavel, and as it turns out, as we were going in the JW Marriott there in DC, I was headed down the escalator, and he was headed up, and he called back to me and said, "I'll call you. I'll call you as soon as I get back." Unfortunately, that was the last time I saw Gary. Unbeknownst to all of us, Gary had been diagnosed with AIDS. And in the early 90s, an AIDS diagnosis was a death sentence. Gary was dead by 1993, by April of 1993. And it was a shock to us. Linda became the first president to serve 2 terms with the help of all the rest of us through that period of time. But the ACE leadership at the time said that we needed to find a way to memorialize Gary's time with us, but also to look to the future in some way. And as I said, Gary and I talked a lot about challenging members, challenging all of us, challenging us to be more creative, challenging us to be more optimistic, challenging us to be more innovative as we went along. And so that's how the Hermance speakership was started now more than 27 years ago. Unfortunately, as I thought through this, there's some of you in the audience today who weren't even born when we started this, but that's the reason we're having this conversation today, because the opportunity to look to the future is what we try to create in this discussion that's named for Gary. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the background for Tristan Ahtun, who's with us today. Tristan is going to challenge you, you know, about things like the indigenous history of the world that we live in and how it impacts us today. But again, the idea is to create a challenge. This speakership next, and all the way through. So I appreciate you allowing me the time to kind of give a little history of where we are and how we got here. But like I said, Tristan's information is in your meeting material, and I'll let him take it from here. And thank you very much. Take it away, Tristan.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizers for the generous invitation to speak today. Um, my name is Tristan Ottone. I'm a member of the Kiowa Tribe of Oklahoma and former Indigenous Affairs editor at High Country News, currently the editor-in-chief at the Texas Observer based out of Austin. I led the land grab universities project that I'm going to talk about today. And while I'm the only person speaking to you this afternoon, I do have to keep in mind that this massive investigative story was a result of a full team coming from a lot of different backgrounds and working together to unravel this story. That team is Margaret Pierce, Catherine Lanford, Jeff McGee, Cody Leff, Kaylin Goodluck, Terrence Salinas, and Dr. Robert Lee. I'm going to share my screen here. So, as most of you know, in 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed the Morrill Act, which distributed public domain lands to raise funds for fledgling colleges across the nation. The story that we've learned around the Morrill Act is that land-grant universities were essentially given the gift of free land to bring education to the masses. But as our investigation reveals, the truth is a lot more complicated. The Morrill Act worked by turning land expropriated from tribal nations into seed money for higher education. In all, the act redistributed nearly 10.8 million acres of land from more than 250 tribal nations for the benefit of 52 colleges. But the Morrill Act's footprint is broken up into almost 80,000 parcels of land scattered across 24 states, making research and reporting on its impacts nearly impossible. Through our 2-year investigation, we've been able to identify and map those 80,000 individual land parcels in order to better understand the relationship between higher education and colonialism. Combined, those scattered parcels, they represent an area approximately the size of Denmark. And our reporting really provides a window into how universities profited from dispossession and genocide. But it also offers opportunities for additional reporting, research, and collaboration to further the investigative work that this project has already kicked off. We'll discuss that in a little bit more detail in a moment, but I want to start by giving you a little bit more background on the Morrill Act. We'll talk a little bit about the background of the project here. So again, as I mentioned before, the project was a collaboration between individuals from a number of different backgrounds, including cartography, photography, journalism, and history. But most importantly, this project was not possible without the scholarship of Dr. Robert Lee, my collaborator on this story and professor of American history at Cambridge University in the UK. Bobby and I met when we were both on fellowships at Harvard in 2017, and it was sheer luck that I walked into his presentation on the work he was already doing on this subject. Essentially, his presentation was a plea for help to continue the work he was doing researching where land-grant universities got their land. And I thought the work that he was doing exemplified what investigative reporting could do and could be. So it was, as they say in the movies, kind of the meet cute for both of us. Again, Bobby is a historian, so from his vantage point, there's been some exploration of the indigenous sources of university land over the last 5 years. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz flagged the issue in her book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States. And cultural theorists like Kay Wayne Yang have discussed it from the perspective of decolonizing universities. More recently, scholars Margaret Nash and Sharon Stein have framed the Morrill Act of 1862 as settler colonial legislation that took from indigenous nations to expand agricultural and mechanical education for settlers. And for those of you who have read our investigation, we were lucky enough to interview Stein for the story and include some of her comments. Meanwhile, researchers at UMass and Virginia Tech made attempts to map the Morrill Act footprint of their individual schools and connect them to indigenous nations. But from what I understand, those projects hit snags and were never completed. Other schools like the University of Iowa, Michigan State, and the University of Nebraska also began mapping their Morrill Act parcels, but never bothered to ask who the land's original owners and caretakers were. This is one of the things that attracted me to the project and to working with Dr. Lee. The idea that there is a whole history, like a whole mythology that's been accepted as fact, but is just so fragile that a properly labeled map really could shatter the entire idea. As most of you know, the idea for land grant colleges was to teach the latest in agricultural science and mechanical arts. And it promised states between 90,000 and 990,000 acres of land based on the size of their congressional delegation in order to fund the colleges that would teach those arts. In order for it to work, Congress had to have land to give. And this is what's crucial to our reporting in this project. The federal government had to acquire it from indigenous nations first before it could be parceled out to universities. Once acquired, that land could range from less than an acre to more than 800 acres. And universities in the East, which had no more public land to give, received coupons known as scrip for land in the West, while schools in the West that appeared as the United States expanded were required to choose land inside their territorial borders. After acquisition, most universities sold their scrip to speculators or land offices. And this is one of the graphics that we prepared for the story. Margaret Pierce put this together to take a look at the step-by-step actions that schools took in order to acquire land and then sell it. Here's another look at that process through the lens of two schools. So you'll see here University of California and Cornell University. As you can see, the biggest differences in how the Morrill Act worked depended on geography. So Eastern schools like Cornell got scrip across the West, and you can see all of the connections there from those flight paths from lands that were acquired and sold connected to the university. While California here got access to the act once it became a state and picked lands inside its borders. An important note, many states in the West did not exist at the time that the Morrill Act was written. So Western expansion and the clearing of indigenous communities opened land up for settlers and for universities to claim and sell land in order to fund their endowments. So you think of the state of Arizona, for instance. Most likely everyone here has heard of Geronimo. At the end of the Apache War and the arrest of Geronimo, the United States was able to move into the area and begin essentially forming the state of Arizona. There was no treaty, there was no negotiation, just outright war. In the wake of that war and the founding of Arizona and eventually the University of Arizona, the university claimed 150,000 acres of land as a result of that process. As did other schools in the East, just in the Arizona territory alone. Here's what that really looks like. This is Tucson, Arizona. This is a piece of land seized from the Apache in 1886, selected by the state of Arizona for the benefit of the University of Arizona. And when you actually get down onto the piece of land, which I'll explain how you can do in a moment, you'll see that the Apache Tears Motel was built on it. And Margaret Pierce also created this map and graphics while Kaylin Goodluck went out and took pictures. So you can zoom in from a 30,000 foot view all the way into the actual piece of land that the university acquired, and then obviously explore and see what's there. We were especially taken aback by the Apache Tears Motel on stolen Apache land, which is why this image appears here. But there are a lot more stories like this to tell because there are so many parcels of land out there that you can easily go and explore. You know, the Land Grab Universities project was about finding all of these pieces, all of these parcels of land and putting them in to a compost hole. As Dr. Lee explains it, the project's goal was to unspool the Morrill Act knot completely. to not just identify the parcels that benefited a single university or were located in a single state, but to locate all of them insofar as much as that was possible. And to track down the indigenous origins of every parcel to gain a sense of the enormity of the wealth transfer that the Morrill Act entailed. So the map that you see here is that idea in its most condensed form. 10.8 million acres claimed by the US government through 162 ratified and unratified treaties, as well as land seizures, land taken from 250 indigenous nations and communities for the benefit of 52 universities in 47 states, worth nearly $500 million in today's currency. And what you can see here are those nearly 10.8 million acres spread across 24 states, and some means to compare. So the pole lines show the Chippewa Treaty of 1837, which later became the source for more than 1 million acres redistributed for the benefit of 33 land-grant universities, which also raised $3.2 million at a cost to the US of less than $65,000 to acquire through treaties. You'll also see Gage County, Nebraska here, which was one of the most densely covered counties in the United States with Morrill Act parcels, land that came from the colonization. You'll also see here in California, the highest percentage of any land cessions near the site of the Mariposa War. What Dr. Lee's work here in this project has done is reconnect histories of dispossession to histories of land redistribution. And it moves from an abstract understanding of universities as beneficiaries of conquest to being able to tie specific institutions to specific tribal nations, and in many cases, specific actions being taken on behalf of settlers by the US government. One of the things that we wanted to do with this project is to make our data available to anybody who wanted to do additional reporting or research or to even fact check our findings. If you're not comfortable using spreadsheets, if you're not a heavy data user, we wanted to make sure that you could still have access to this information in a clear and user-friendly way outside of what we were providing. So on the website landgrabbview.org, you have access to the same data that we were using with the same level of accuracy, and you can explore all of it through interactive maps. So we have university pages like Cornell's here. It gives you a lot of information. It gives you the founding date, student enrollment, how many acres it received, but most importantly, what you can do is you can play with a map that we put together. So Jeff McGee and Cody Leff developed the site in these maps, and what it allows you to do is see the connections between the institutions and the land. You can also zoom in and get really detailed all the way down to the acre. You can fly through or even locate yourself on the map. Those crosshairs on the side there allow the website to locate you and find out if you live next to one of these parcels or even on one of them, as our developer, Jeff McGee, found out during the reporting process that he lives on a parcel in Seattle. You also have the opportunity to check addresses. So the search function at the bottom right of the screen allows you to check an address and see if it's on a parcel or even what land cession it's in. So in the case of Cornell, you can really see the massive footprint the institution has across the country and gives you an endless array of information to really sort through. There's a ton of information to play with and allows you to explore and construct your own narratives and inquiries. You also have the option to play with links to click on state boundaries, university links, or even indigenous land cessions. Obviously, that information on indigenous land cessions is invaluable for a number of applications outside of this project. We understand that a lot of reporters, for instance, are able to use that information in reporting to even do small forms of land acknowledgements in their journalism, really starting to hack at ideas of land ownership and those mythologies around. You'll also see that in the case of Cornell, statements when we asked for comment on this story. In Cornell's case, they said that there was no information to share, and as I mentioned earlier, you'll see in all of the stats, including the fact that in 2018, there were 23,600 students enrolled, of which only 69 identified as American Indian or Alaska Native. Here's what you can do when you explore. If you take a look at the University of California, for instance, you can get the mile-high view and see all of the connections that the university has to Morolac lands. If you want to zoom in on Los Angeles, you'll get more detail on those individual land parcels. Essentially, what Cody and Jeff have done is create pages for each and every one of these land parcels that we've identified. So that's more than 80,000 individual web pages so that you can get an incredible amount of information, acre by acre, state by state, and university by university. So when you zoom into a parcel in California, you can click and go to the parcel page. And if you click on the parcel page, you'll be able to get a lot of very sort of detailed information. You can see treaty co-signers, when it was acquired by the United States, and the gains that are associated with it. So just with this page, you can start to construct a story about this very specific piece of land. And because the site works on mobile, you can actually go there by locating yourself on the phone and go to that actual parcel, which is what our photographer, Kaylin Goodluck, was doing, and is how we know that this parcel in Los Angeles, all this metadata essentially that you're seeing, is actually the home to the Directors Guild of America. So the indigenous caretakers for this land was the Buena Vista, the Tejon, the Uva, and 7 other indigenous nations. It was ceded by unratified treaty in 1851 to the state of California, and the land was given to the University of California, who raised about $788.74. Obviously, the state of California, the United States, paid no money for that land. Again, being able to locate yourself and explore what's on the land has given us a real window into sort of what is there, and gives us an alternative understanding of what is there, of what these parcels actually look like in their history. So this is private residences in Los Angeles also. There were about half a dozen indigenous caretakers that also signed an unratified treaty in 1851 too. Another piece of land that went to the University of California. We know that the university raised $786.74 off of this piece of land. But Kaylin also sort of did a road trip around the US in search of these parcels and identifying things that were of particular interest visually and story-wise. So for instance, you have the Fort Lawton Post Cemetery in Seattle, Washington. You know, the indigenous caretakers were the Duwamish and the Suquamish. It was transferred to the United States by treaty in 1855. This particular piece of land originally went to the state of South Carolina, and the money from it was for Clemson University and South Carolina State University. The amount paid for this particular parcel of land was $3.91 through the treaty made with the Duwamish and Suquamish. The university raised $58.06 off this piece of land. It's also important to note that despite signing a treaty with the United States, the Duwamish remain an unrecognized tribe in Washington. As you saw on our sort of opening page here, these are cornfields in Adams, Nebraska. This was originally Kaw Nation land. It was ceded by treaty in 1825 for the benefit of Ohio State University. 93 cents was paid for title through the treaty, and the university was able to raise $88.79. Finally, Minnesota. This was ceded to the United States in 1851 for the University of Minnesota. $3.78 paid, $979.69 raised. So there's an incredible amount of information that you can gather from the website just by exploring and being able to actually get out and see what's out there. But there is still a lot more work that needs to be done around this topic. You know, last summer we reported that at least 16 land-grant universities, which is nearly a third of the schools in the system, still retain more than 500,000 acres of land that was expropriated from indigenous nations. And that land brought in at least $8.7 million in revenue in fiscal year 2019 alone. So these are remaining Morrill Act acres that are still producing money for land-grant universities. And when I say 2019 alone, we don't know how much money that this land has actually created for universities since their acquisition. So this is just a snapshot of 1 year. All of that data and all of the stories data is, again, available for you to download through the website or on our GitHub page. This is basically an open source data set, which is available for you to use for any purpose that you like. There's a lot more in here than what you see in the magazine or on the website. And it's ideal for additional research and investigation to take this story in a lot of new directions. So what we've tried to do here is make it as easy as possible for you to get into. We've created a user guide to describe the contents in plain language. And here's what it looks like. As you know, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a really big one with nearly 80,000 rows of information. Again, the purpose of this is to make sure that you can essentially play too. We believe that information is a fundamental human right, and we believe that our work should be freely accessible to anyone who wants to use it. And since we've made this public, we've seen a lot of places that have started to use it. Land-grant universities has really started a public conversation on the debts universities owe to indigenous communities that we believe will continue long into the future. There are a number of ways in which we've seen researchers and reporters engage in the work, and each is really unique to the institution and the community. So we've seen a lot in the journalism area, and there have been 3 areas we've really seen reporters play in when it comes to taking on this story. And that's localizing data, contextualizing data, or adapting data. So as you'll see here on this slide, from Ion, Ohio, the investigative news outlet Ion, Ohio mapped all of the lands that supported Ohio schools, which is more than 614,000 acres spread out over 14 states using the data that we put out. For that entire 614,000 acres, the US paid an estimated $35,000 for that land, and the sales netted about $340,000. So that's a return of nearly 10 times the purchase that the university was able to profit off of. That in current dollars, that's about $6.8 million. It's a great way like that some reporters have been able to provide detail and localized analysis of this information. We also saw at Vox magazine, which is produced by journalism students at the University of Missouri, the specific look into Mizzou's footprint and relationship with the indigenous communities it received land from, which is the Osage. So using just a really simple timeline, reporters added context to the data. So revealing that through miscommunication or even deceptive practices, the Osage ceded all of their land to the federal government and were forced to move to Oklahoma, making that land available to the University of Missouri. Finally, there are stories that go beyond the data we collected that instead utilize Dr. Lee's methodology. In September of last year, for instance, Scallywag magazine revealed that Southern universities funded their early years through the sale of land expropriated from indigenous communities. University of North Carolina, of which you can see on this map, took more than 200,000 acres of Cherokee and Chickasaw lands that were gained through indigenous removal. They also found that more than 30% of UNC's annual budget was comprised of land sales between 1818 and 1840, which is well before the Morrill Act became law. So this is being able to sort of take the general idea of what land grab was about and push it even further to explore other areas that we weren't even able to get into. In terms of institutional change, we're also starting to see some movement in response to our reporting. And like the journalism I just highlighted, each university has handled the information in a very different way. Almost directly after publication of the story, the University of Florida Student Senate petitioned for an inquiry into their university's connections to indigenous expropriation. The Yale Coalition for Endowment Justice used the article for a read-in protest on campus. Cornell University Student Assembly approved a 10-point petition demanding more financial aid for Native students, curriculum reform, and student recruitment from tribal nations impacted by the Morrill Act. And college admission stakeholders issued a policy brief demanding that Native American students at land-grant universities receive free tuition. Thousands of students at scores of universities are now being taught this history both in the US and abroad, including, for instance, at University of Missouri, where educators are ensuring that the entire student body knows this history by incorporating the article into its freshman composition program. We've also seen similar moves at Washington State University, who first rewrote its land acknowledgements after our story came out, and then pledged to commission a team to determine reconciliation plans. The same is happening with Texas A&M, who's working toward assembling a task force to better understand the history of the Morrill Act on the institution, as well as its impacts on Indigenous communities. Another response we've seen are conferences and teach-ins. At UC Berkeley, for example, there was a 2-day symposium to explore and address the university's responsibility to Indigenous communities in California. And the meet included nearly 24 speakers, breakout sessions to deal with calls to action, inspirations for accountability and analysis, and particularly around land returns and the mechanics of land returns, as well as examples of how cities, states, and churches and the federal government has also returned land to tribal nations. We've also seen similar teach-ins at Cornell, which was the largest Morrill Act beneficiary, but staff and faculty also took another step, and they launched a project to document the university's financial windfall through a regularly updated and dedicated website, which you can see here. The goal is to present as much factual information about Cornell's parcels and to determine and consult with tribes impacted by Cornell to determine possible remedies. And as of this morning, I've learned that Cornell University has also updated their land acknowledgement to incorporate our findings, which is pretty exciting. Ohio, we see a similar initiative underway. In this case, Ohio State has announced that it is working in partnership with the First Nations Development Institute to begin conversations with affected tribes and begin to determine an appropriate path forward to develop an understanding of specific reparative actions that would benefit Indigenous communities. The work is expected to take time, obviously, but we think could represent one of the most comprehensive attempts at reconciliation plans taken by the university in regards to impacted communities to date. We also know there are additional initiatives at University of Minnesota, University of Arizona, Utah State, and MIT and University of Connecticut. So these are a handful of actions that we've seen taken since publication, and each speaks to the unique characteristics of the community involved. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to the handling of this information, but there are common themes. Apologies, the establishment of truth commissions to further investigate the story's findings, and conversations around reparations. In some cases, there's a combination of all three. But the common theme is truth-telling. And our biggest question in working on this project has been whether or not clear, transparent reporting can encourage more truthful conversations on campuses that lead to action by administration. We think the answer is yes. And we think that that answer also rests with you as audiences to decide what's right and what's best for your community. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to questions or conversations. happy to answer anything that I can on the topic. And
Tristan, has there been it looked like the University of Florida student resolution called for a study essentially. Has anybody made a specific call for reparations or some sort of compensation?
yeah, we've seen a lot of conversation around this. Wisconsin, Connecticut, Florida, California. There was one idea that we saw a while back about using that endowment money for purchasing lands to give back to affected tribal nations, for instance, like in sort of a land swap situation. Again, it differs on where the conversation is happening. But it seems to us that at the moment, free tuition for Native students has been the common demand at almost every institution, and seems to be sort of like the common denominator on some level. Land returns is a little bit different and obviously complicated to sort of like do, but it seems to be the area that a lot of folks are beginning to push. And again, at the University of California symposium, there was a lot of discussion about how this has worked in the past and how universities could do that now too. And I really encourage folks to watch some of the videos from that symposium to get a sense of how people are thinking about it. And I think the massive amount of possibilities that can be explored.
So and anybody that has questions for Tristan, I encourage you to enter them in the chat and we'll handle them in order. I wanted to me, one of the mind blowers was seeing those arcs that go to other states. I always thought, well, I had initially thought of it as, the state has the power to kind of shift land internally, but how does that work when I see that arrow go from University of Florida to the California coast? Like, does the federal government transfer that land then to the university?
Yeah, so basically those East Coast universities, oversimplified here, they don't have any more public land to give to their universities anymore, hence the script coupons that go to lands in the West. Usually it's prospectors that are going out there taking a look, and they're usually being sold very quickly after acquisition. Only a few places like Cornell, for instance, actually speculate with it because Ezra Cornell is actually buying them and then sort of doubling up on the profits for the university. But generally it's it's a coupon for something that exists all the way over in what's currently Washington. It's sold off, the money shows up in your endowment afterwards. So yeah, geography plays a large role in how those are playing out. Also, those schools with script don't still have any of that land, which is what makes the finding that a number of Western schools are still profiting off of those lands was not only a fluke that we discovered during the reporting process, but also unique to the Western schools.
We had a question about how do the 1994 land grant institutions fit into your project?
More or less, they don't. The 1894 and the 1994, yeah, those what we were specific. While those are funding mechanisms for those institutions, they don't specifically deal with land like the first act did. So we were narrowed in on the 1860s folks.
Great. Okay. How can the schools who are making changes to statements and taking actions report that up through the project so the project can continue to be the center of information for this topic? I'm not reading that very well. I'm sorry.
I think I just saw that one pop up. Yeah, that's a great question. We try to update the site as much as possible as a resource for folks to be able to go to and take a look at. But more or less, there's no centralized way in which we're getting a lot of this information. For instance, I told you, I learned just this morning that Cornell had updated their land acknowledgement. We think that probably happened in the last couple of months, but we just had no way of knowing. So usually it's emailing the website to let us know when things are happening. But from what I understand at Texas A&M, there is a movement toward having some sort of institutional support to really network with universities that are making changes to also help with that process and gathering, which obviously we're excited about because we can update our website. But it seems more importantly is that if there's kind of a hive where all of that information is coming in and folks are learning from each other, their goal, it seems to be, is to sort of be a central hub to really learn from each other and disseminate information in that way. I'm not sure where the status on that project is at the moment, but in short, somebody just has to tell us. So.
All right. Let's see. So I don't see any other questions in the. Oh, okay. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned genocide and wanted to surface that the university where this questionnaire works, University of Vermont, has a history of eugenics research targeted toward indigenous people. I'll probably say this wrong, but Abenaki and others. Has your research unearthed similar activities at other universities?
In short, no, as it wasn't necessarily our focus, but we think that by kind of putting a new spotlight on the information and again providing that data for researchers, we kind of hear things about folks being able to dig into where money was going, doing forensic accounting practices, really being able to find out what was going on at the time at those universities, where the money was coming from and what it was being used for. So, I mean, we think that there are hundreds, if not thousands of other stories that can be done. For instance, looking specifically at, actions that universities were taking at the time with the money that was coming in, I think will make for some pretty incredible reporting and writing. But it's a massive project, and unfortunately, we were really only able to take sort of a 30,000-foot view of everything. Those deep dives we're really hoping to see more of in the future from independent researchers and reporters.
Got about 3 minutes left. I was wondering are there universities that have, been, I don't know, particularly honest or effective in kind of, weaving this part of their history into the stories we all tell, our origin stories, maybe doing a better job of incorporating this into, the stories we tell about ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think we've seen the sort of forward-facing land acknowledgements, for instance, that have begun to at least take this on. But from what we understand, it's not happening necessarily at an administrative level. So all of the things, all of the sort of impacts that I shared with you just a few minutes ago, those are all coming from students, staff, and faculty. We have yet to see an administration take this on specifically. Those actions are kind of bubbling up from the ground up. And obviously they're becoming very successful, but in terms of how that's being integrated into what universities are telling their students or what universities are telling the public, that seems to be happening in for lack of a better word, a more clandestine way. We mentioned University of Missouri. As far as I understand, there's been no movement from the administration at University of Missouri to incorporate any of those findings into any documents or public-facing documents, but their students are learning it because faculty have thought that it was important that they do know it. So there are two levels of activity going on here. And when in saying that, I think that it's up to stakeholders at universities and university communities to take action. It's the only place that we're seeing action. And I think one that's slightly disheartening to see administration not embrace the information in ways that might make the university more just or equitable. But it also gives me a lot of hope that there are enough people that seem to think that this is important enough to do something that have taken action. And I think that speaks volumes of the land grant system.
Okay, well, that unfortunately is all the time that's been allotted for this. There are more questions. How would you like to handle that? Do you want to share an email address? Do you want us to post something on the conference platform? How could we do that?
I've saved the chat that's in Zoom, and so I could post that document or share it with Tristan, and perhaps he can take a look, and if there's any answers you want to make, I can post that back out to the app. We could talk
Excellent.
offline, okay?
Sure.
Excellent. And Tristan has posted an email address as well.
Yeah, you can find me here. Feel free to email with any questions, concerns. If you see things happening, again, we'd love to hear from you. Happy to speak with you there with anything you've got. So, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Tristan.
Hello again, everyone. This session continues right on to the next portion of our agenda for the day, which is where we have the opportunity to present some awards and honors and recognitions. It's my pleasure and honor to be able to do that as your now past president. La Rochelle and I talked, and something that's been different about our virtual conferences. In a more traditional year, we typically have the passing of the gavel at the very end of our conference. So she and I agreed I would still do some ceremonial duties for this conference and present some of our awards. So when our ACE staff gets the slide deck for this next portion up and ready, we will begin. You're getting a preview. All right, so for the first, that's all right. For our first award that I have the honor to present, this is our ACE Fellow Award. This is the highest honor and recognition that ACE gives to one of our own members to recognize their distinguished career and service. And it's my pleasure to present this award to my friend and oftentimes my roommate at ACE conferences, Becky Koch. You can read more about Becky's legacy and her accomplishments in your program book, so I'll just share a couple of highlights and then we will hear from her. Becky recently retired as Agriculture Communication Director from North Dakota State University last fall after 29 years. And you will see in her accomplishments that she often found a way to pay it forward. In fact, she's still teaching an Intro to Ag Communication course, even in her retirement. She also served ACE in numerous capacities through our special interest groups, now called Learning Communities, and during stints on the ACE board as treasurer and president. I found Becky to have an unfailingly positive outlook on things. And it's my pleasure to honor Becky with our 2021 ACE Fellow Award. Please help me congratulate and welcome Becky.
Thank you so very much, Jennifer. I just really am overwhelmed with this award. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to ACE for this incredible honor. After looking through the list of the past recipients on the website and even reading the remarks of some of the recent recipients, I was even more humbled and appreciative. So a big thank you to ACE and to my NDSU colleagues. Greatly appreciate it. But as Jennifer said, after 29 and a half years, I did retire or semi-retire from North Dakota State University last November. I grew up in Kansas and went to K-State, and then we spent 30 winters in Fargo. So my husband and I recently retired to the Tucson, Arizona area. But with semi-retirement, I've really been amazed at how I've still every day applied a lot of the information or processes I used in my professional life to my personal life. It just became part of my daily routine, I guess you would say. And one of the things I always enjoyed the most was teaching. So rather than giving you a lot of philosophical words of wisdom, which may not be my strength, let me share some of the typical things I've taught over the years through my ag communications work that I hope you can apply to both your personal and professional lives. Like has been said in some of the earlier breakouts I've taken part in, a lot of this isn't brand new to us professional communicators, but sometimes we just need to remind ourselves. But for one thing, at NDSU, we developed a communications camp where topic teams came together to truly develop a multimedia program. And we even developed a virtual communications camp in 2016, long before COVID required everything to go virtual. But in communications camp, we started out with 4 big questions. And in meetings and just discussions with colleagues, I caught myself always saying, okay, let's stop here and talk about our 4 big questions. And partly because I knew you didn't want to look at my face this whole 12 minutes, even though they told me I had 20. Don't worry, you're not going to listen to me for 20 minutes. Let me share some slides so you don't have to look at me. But first of all, what is the goal? Not, our goal is to develop a video or publicize a meeting, but what is the ultimate goal for our target audience? What is that change of behavior that needs a multi-pronged communications program? Kind of like Covey's begin with the end in mind. Secondly, who's the target audience? And no, the general public is not a target audience in my book. Even North Dakota farmers isn't specific enough. Reaching a dryland wheat farmer in the West is a lot different than reaching an irrigated potato producer in the East. And reaching a single mom with a toddler is a lot different than reaching a retired couple, though both need nutrition information. Third, what are your key messages? Our universities are famous for information overload. We need to pick out the 3 or 4 high points that we truly want our target audience to remember and to apply. And fourth, what are some user scenarios? Brainstorm some ways to reach those target audiences where they already are. Ironically, I try to follow these same steps in my personal semi-retired life today, and I encourage you to apply this quick thought process. So first of all, what's my goal? What do I want to accomplish today or this week or this month? Recently, I found 2 Sheryl Sandberg quotes that I'd like to share. One is ruthlessly prioritize. None of us has time to do everything we'd like to do, even in retirement. So we must ruthlessly prioritize, both at work and in life. And done is better than perfect, whether that's a media plan, a brochure, an online program, a video, or any communications project, or whether getting it done is organizing the office of things that moved from North Dakota to Arizona, but maybe shouldn't have. Done is better than perfect. And believe me, that project is not done anyway. But don't suffer from paralysis by analysis. So again, after your goal, even in personal life, who's my target audience? Now, granted, this one's usually a little bit easier than since my husband and I are still coming out of COVID quarantine, and we really haven't met very many fellow Tucsonans yet. But I plan my communications differently if I'm talking to my mom on the phone or Facebook videoing with our son, or if I'm playing with our 8-month-old great niece. And still, even in a personal life, what are the key messages? If I'm videoing with a friend or calling a family member or simply carrying on a conversation, what are the priorities I want to share? I compare it to the Sunday sermon. The pastor may speak for about 20 minutes or so, but she's done her job if I pull out one major nugget that I can truly apply to my life. And then, what are the user scenarios? Probably like many of you who are parents, I learned a great scenario for having a conversation with our son when he was a teenager was in the car when we didn't have to make eye contact. So whether you're dealing with an ag communications issue or a family or personal matter, I encourage you to quickly ask yourself, what's the goal? Who's my target audience? What are the key messages? And what are a couple scenarios? There are two other questions that I often use to test both my personal and professional communication. Who cares? And so what? Think about those two blunt questions. How often do we scroll through Facebook and wonder, why in the world did somebody post that? Really, who cares? And the content, does it pass the who cares test? Then so what? Provide some context of what this means or should mean to people. Share the impact, not just the activity. So what? That's one reason I've really loved my career. We communications professionals answer that so what? Here's what this research means for you. Face it, we professional communicators are probably more important now with Google than we were even before everybody could find everything, whether it's true or not, online. We provide that unbiased research-based information. However, we're especially challenged to have others find it, respect it, and use it. I've also loved my career because we truly help people improve their lives. Some of the most rewarding work I've done in my career was helping North Dakotans prepare for and recover from floods, which is pretty ironic since the state's in such a drought right now. But I hope all of you feel that satisfaction from knowing we're helping people, whether or not we hear it directly from them. But mostly, I've loved my career because of the relationships. Some of my best lifelong friends are through my NDSU work and through ACE. I hope each of you challenges yourself to truly get involved in ACE. Don't say, I'm too busy. That's a lame excuse in my book. I'm sorry, we're all busy. But again, it's priorities. Where are you going to prioritize your time? And I learned that through prioritizing time with ACE, it's really paid off. In fact, I have a little challenge for each of us as we wrap up this conference. Yet today, don't put it off because I know what happens when we do that, but I challenge each of us to do something here. Let's say you're more of a senior member of ACE. I encourage you to just drop a line or chat more personally in the app with a newer member who you've met virtually through the conference. Just say hello, welcome, whatever. Just make that connection, that relationship. If you're a newer member of ACE, drop a line or give a call to a presenter or a leader who's impacted you in some way, no matter how small. or just simply connect with somebody you didn't know before this conference. Again, you can do that through the Whova app, but don't forget about that ACE online directory to track down people all across the country who are ACE members. So just do it. And as Sheryl Sandberg said, done is better than perfect. So get her done. That quick connection might be a relationship that lasts a lifetime, even into retirement. So even if you're introverted, challenge yourself to reach out. As that famous philosopher, Ted Lasso, said, hey, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. So get out of your comfort zone and reach out to make a new friend and colleague through ACE. And yes, I did use reach out on purpose for those of you who have been around ACE for a while. I'm glad ACE is rejuvenating the mentorship program since it will help us develop relationships more. And I also applaud ACE's diversity and inclusion efforts. We're heading back to Fargo here in late July because our son is going to be in a community musical, Rock of Ages. And those 80s rock songs weren't really the inspiration I wanted to get across today. But yet, since we've gotten into musicals over the years, I did want to share some lines from a couple others related to the diversity and inclusion effort especially. As Jennifer said, I remotely taught Intro to AgCom for NDSU this last semester and really enjoyed it. So I asked the students to watch a clip of When I Grow Up from the musical Matilda, and then just write a short paper for me about what they wanted to be when they grew up. But the song ends with some really strong lines. If I think the ending is fixed already, I might as well be saying, I think that it's okay. And that's not right. Think about that. If we think something wrong is a done deal and we don't speak up, that's like saying we approve. But even the kids in the musical realized that's not right. I challenge each of us to say or do something when it's not right. Not easy, but we need to. Rather than thinking that an inappropriate decision is final, realize it's not right and speak up and take action rather than just letting it slide by. Of course, we communicators must have those relationships with the decision makers, colleagues, and others to be at the table, to be able to speak up and help take those appropriate actions. One last musical quote about personal and professional relationships and just life in general, maybe. But in Hamilton, Aaron Burr advises Alexander Hamilton to talk less and smile more. If we truly listen to understand someone else and give that friendly smile, the relationship probably will grow deeper. Even with this virtual conference, we've been able to smile together with the trivia and the PowerPoint karaoke. A huge thank you to the conference committee and the board for making this virtual conference both educational and fun. Now, I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but our professional and personal lives are about relationships. We can learn from each other, whether it's, how do you prioritize work requests, or how are you developing online courses, which, by the way, both of those were on the ACE forums. So I really encourage you to utilize those ACE forums. It's one of the best ways we have for networking. But ACE relationships, you just never know where they're going to take you. For example, when my family was preparing to travel to Bonaire, which I bet a lot of you haven't even heard of, there was an ACE friend who was retired on that Caribbean island. And he provided some great tips, and we just had a blast getting together with him and his wife when we were on Bonaire. So you just never know where your ACE relationships will take you. ACE has provided me with relationships of colleagues and friends for a lifetime. And I hope our organization does that for you too. Again, thank you to ACE for this tremendous honor. And even as we retire, keep in touch, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, for those remarks. I hope you can hear the virtual clapping, and take a moment now that you're done talking to scroll through that chat. There's a lot of congrats and thank yous there for you. Next, we'll be recognizing our Rising Star Award recipients, formerly known as the Pioneer Awards. These awards recognize our up-and-coming members of our ACE community. They were nominated for both their service to ACE as well as their expertise in their careers. And this award is given to folks who have been ACE members for 10 or fewer years. Our first recipient is Kelly Anderson, and she worked with Becky at North Dakota State University. Kelly has served ACE since joining the North Dakota State University team in 2015. She came to North Dakota after having experience with her own communication, marketing, and graphics company, and at Oklahoma State University. And within ACE, she has served with our marketing learning community. Congratulations, Kelly. Next, we'll recognize Anna Iverson from the LSU Ag Center. She's been a member of that team and ACE since 2015, and you may recognize her name as a recipient of numerous awards through our Critique and Awards program over the years. I had the pleasure of working with Anna on conference committees, both this year and in the run-up to our conference in New Orleans a few years ago. Within ACE, she's provided leadership to the public and graphic design learning community. And at work, she's responsible for working on a variety of creative functions that support educational, digital, and marketing materials for LSU Ag Center. Congratulations, Anna. We also recognize as a rising star Ashley McLeod-Morin from the UF IFAS Center for Public Issues Education in Agriculture and Natural Resources. She serves as a communication coordinator there, and she also serves as on the outreach team for the Southeastern Coastal Center for Agricultural Health and Safety. And as part of that role, she helped develop a COVID-19 communications toolkit that served agricultural organizations and rural communities. She has also been recognized numerous times in ACE's Critique and Awards program and provides leadership as well for the National Agriculture Communications Symposium. She's currently pursuing a PhD in agricultural communications. Congratulations, Ashley. We also recognize as a rising star Stacy Stearns, who's an educational outreach program specialist for Yukon Extension. I met Stacy when we were on a bus ride to a picnic at the Memphis ACE conference a few years ago, and have pretty consistently been in contact with her ever since, whether it's answering questions through ACE forums or serving on different committees. You recognize Stacy as co-chair of this conference that you're in right now. And she's also active in ACE as part of the media relations and writing learning community. Stacy is also a current fellow with the New Technologies in Ag Extension, or NTAE fellow, through the Extension Foundation, formerly known as E-Extension. Congratulations, Stacy. ACE also has the opportunity each year to present awards of excellence. These are awards that are coordinated and given by our learning communities. And this year we have one of those to award, the 2021 Award of Excellence in the academic and research area goes to Lisa Lundy from the University of Florida. She's a professor in the Department of Agricultural Education and Communication, and also serves as undergraduate coordinator for the department. As well, she's an affiliate faculty member for the Public Issues Education, or PI Center, and a 3-time alumna of the University of Florida. In addition, Lisa's an accredited public relations professional and has been active in ACE since 2002. Her service to ACE includes serving as the editor of our journal, the Journal of Applied Communications. Congratulations, Lisa. One thing that is very integral to ACE is that our organization is a place where research and practice intersect. You had the opportunity on Monday, and if you missed it, check out the recordings, where our researchers and our academic colleagues and their students shared the latest from their research. As part of that, they also present a number of awards focused around that area. And so those were announced and presented earlier this week during their session. I'll mention them just briefly here. The 2021 Jack Article of the Year Award is presented to Laura Morgan Fisher, Courtney Myers, R. Glenn Cummins, Courtney Gibson, and Matthew Baker for their article, Creating Relevancy in Agricultural Science Information, examining the impact of motivational salience, involvement, and pre-existing attitudes on visual attention to scientific information, available in the Journal of Applied Communications. Congratulations. Other academic and research awards presented are for outstanding paper. Team members Marley E. Stoller, Joy N. Rumble, Emily B. Buck, Annie R. Specht, Wuying Hu, and C. Lynn Knight from the Ohio State University for their article on consumers' purchasing intent regarding conventional, alternative, and cultured meats. This group also awarded awards for outstanding paper runner-up and outstanding paper second runner-up. And you can see the names and titles listed. And again, these will also be posted on the ACE website. The Outstanding Poster Award is presented to the team of Allison R. Fortner, Alexa J. Lamb from the University of Georgia for their poster, The Impact of Source Credibility when Communicating About Agricultural Science on Twitter, an Exploratory Study. Congratulations. Awards are also presented for Outstanding Poster Runner-Up and Outstanding Poster Second Runner-Up. The Outstanding Dissertation Award is presented to Nellie Hill for Public Opinion of Gene Editing in Agriculture, a mixed method study of online media and metaphors. Her committee was chaired by Dr. Courtney Myers. Congratulations. Outstanding Dissertation Runner-Up is presented to Moses Mike. Congratulations for your work. The Outstanding Thesis Award is presented to Kara Elizabeth Jolly for Untapped Potential, the role Oklahoma craft breweries play in communities. Her committee was chaired by Dwayne Cartmel from Oklahoma State. Congratulations. An Outstanding Thesis Runner-Up was presented to Caitlin Spradley. And the Outstanding Proposal Award goes to Audrey King for exploring the co-creation of land-grant brand identity amongst faculty members at Oklahoma State University, chaired by Kisto Settle from Oklahoma State. Congratulations, Audrey. And lastly, I also wish to recognize ACE member anniversaries. We have for 65 years, Delmar Hattisall, 55 years, George Mays, 49 years, Gary Beal, and 45 years, Dave King, who you met just a moment ago. Celebrating 40 years with ACE, Maxine Ferris, Tom Knecht, and William H. Bill Smith. Celebrating 35 years is Tom Merrill, and at 30 years, Jim Coates and Becky Koch. Amy Hartman celebrates 25 years with ACE. In recognition of 20 years with ACE, Tracy Ferwerda and Craig Woods. 15 years, Steve Miller. And celebrating 10 years with ACE, David Keto, Carrie Lewis, Daryl Palmer, Annie Specht, and Lyndall Stout. And celebrating 5 years with ACE, Kelly Anderson, Michael Berglund Reese, Eve Vanessa Campoverde, Lindsay Davidson, Ruth Inman, Rob Matson, Michelle V. Moncrief, Samantha Murray, Taylor Ruth, Art Shirley, La Rochelle Smith, Megan Sprague, and Stacy Stearns. Thank you, everyone, for your membership and your commitment to ACE. Please join me in recognizing once more all of the recipients of our ACE Honor Awards and the other awards that were shared this morning. Chris?
Thank you, Jennifer. Congratulations to everyone. We are now going to pivot to the Reuben Brigham Award. Just a word about the award. It was established by ACE in 1947, and it honors the Reuben Brigham, who organized the American Association of Agricultural College Editors, which is 1 or 2 or 3 names ago for ACE. So, so this is kind of the Founders Award, as I understanding it, and it's reserved for a communicator who's made a major contribution in the field of ag, natural resources, human and life sciences at a regional or national level. And Greg, who we're about to hear from, has certainly done that. Greg is editor-in-chief at DTN, The Progressive Farmer, where he's worked since 1997. And I nominated him because of he's kind of this total package. He's a master practitioner. As I understand it, they almost had to create a new level of proficiency recognition in his professional association, I think called Master Writer, because he'd surpassed all the previous bars that they had set for recognition. But in addition to that, he's really service oriented, and he's given a lot of his time. You know, he's heeded Becky's call to say, you know, nobody's too busy, because nobody's busier than a guy who's running DTN Progressive Farmer, yet he is serving his colleagues. And again, today, sharing with us. I met Greg a few years ago when we had the joint meeting at the Ag Media Summit in Scottsdale. And since then, have kept in touch and followed his career. And so I'm really proud to introduce, as the 2021 Reuben Brigham Award winner, Greg Hillier. Greg, take it away.
Hey, thanks so much, Chris. And it's an honor to be with everyone here this afternoon. I'm coming from my home office in St. Louis, Missouri. And I kind of feel like that guy who's in the Folgers coffee commercial. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the scene opens up with a guy on a Zoom meeting. He's dressed in a nice suit and tie, but the camera on his desktop laptop is positioned so you can see what he's not wearing, and it shows him he's wearing boxer shorts. So I can assure you I'm not wearing boxer shorts, but I do have a comfortable pair of golfing shorts on today. But regardless of that, have to admit it was really a surprise, and certainly a pleasant surprise when I found out I had been selected. Again, I'm extremely honored and humbled to receive the Reuben Brigham Award. I looked at the list of previous recipients, and I knew a lot of the people. It certainly read like a who's who of ag communicators. Some of the people on the list I've actually worked with over the years. A couple of them were even my supervisors in some previous occupations. And a handful also I had interviewed for stories that I've written over the years. So it was really interesting to see who some of the past recipients are. I'm sure there's a lot of people to thank. I certainly want to thank ACE. Most of all, I want to thank you, Chris. I'm sure you did the lion's share of the work of putting together my nomination and all the supporting materials. And as Chris mentioned, yeah, we did meet for the first time at that meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona. And like you said, we've kept in touch since then. That was the first time ACE had a joint meeting with the Ag Media Summit, and for all intended purposes, I recall, I think everyone really was happy with it. So I hope in the future we'll have an opportunity to all gather and meet together as well. You know, as I was preparing my remarks, I kind of did a deep dive into some of ACE's history, and it was interesting to see how similar ACE is to the American Ag Editors Association, my professional organization, which is now called the Ag Communications Network. You know, some of those common threads included, you know, we're both organizations are dedicated to professional improvement. You know, I looked at your agenda and I saw some similar and common topics of interest. You know, I saw those sessions on blogs, how to get the most, you know, from social media platforms, you know, and how to tell stories on digital platforms versus print and vice versa. And those are certainly a lot of topics we're exploring, you know, at our own annual convention, which is coming up in Kansas City in July. Also notice that both organizations have international members. As a member of AAEA, we also belong to the International Federation of Ag Journalists. And that's a collection of guilds of ag communicators from around the world representing 55 countries. So it's definitely a very interesting organization, one that I've also gotten to get involved with over the years. And of course, we both support aspiring young ag communicators through ACT. AAEA provides scholarships and internships to the college students, and usually ACT holds their annual meeting in conjunction with the Ag Media Summit. And a couple other things, you know, you've got the Ag Communications Documentation Center at the University of Illinois that's headed up by Jim Evans. I've known Jim for many, many years. That's also the location where AAEA houses its archives and historical records. And so, you know, it's a very important resource for us as well. And ACE is a little older than AAEA, but we will be celebrating our 100th anniversary this year in Kansas City. And then last but not least, who knew that we all have members who are musically inclined. ACE has the extension chords, and we have our own band, Quasimojo, which includes Owen Roberts, who's now with the University of Illinois. So maybe we could have a joint concert together sometime. I think that would be fun. But you know, as ag communicators, certainly, you know, our roles have certainly changed over the years. You know, we wear many hats. You know, there's a lot of noise out there. You know, with our, you know, competing with our content. You know, so how do we rise above that noise? You know, everyone who has a social media platform thinks they're a content expert. So, you know, it's definitely changing times, evolving times for any of us who are in ag communication. But, you know, like the extension service, farm magazines basically got their start by helping to disseminate, you know, that information, that research from land-grant universities to be that trusted partner, you know, of unbiased information. And of course, that still continues today. And I think too, you know, Becky certainly mentioned this, you know, as ag communicators, you know, the one thing is that we have this great passion for agriculture. You know, let's be honest, we don't do this for the money, but I think, you know, I hope that, like me, I hope you feel like you really make a difference when you're communicating to farmers, to people involved with agriculture, or those who have an interest in, you know, where their food comes from. You know, that's a noble effort that we should all be proud of. So one of the things I'm going to take a little different approach. Becky kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, but Chris alluded to it, talking about how my professional organization has been so important to me, not only in my professional life, but also my personal life. As a member of AAEA, I've certainly met a lot of people, have certainly expanded my skill set. And I hope some of the comments that I talk about today will encourage you and prompt you to also get involved with ACE. You know, it doesn't matter if you're just starting out in your career, or if you're towards the end of your career, getting involved with that with your professional organization will pay you, 100 times over, what you put into it. And that's certainly been the case with me. I was lucky. Most of my employers encouraged me to get involved with AAEA. I had a great mentor at my first job out of college at Wallace's Farmer. This mentor actually became president of AAEA as well as IFAJ, and he encouraged me to get involved with AAEA. I would say in the early years, I was laid back. I certainly was a member, so I could enter some of the writing and photography contests, but my involvement was lacking, probably because I was just a young kid out of college and really didn't know what I was doing. But I finally got involved with some of the committees, started out looking at those committees that were of greater interest to me at the time: photography, writing, design, things of that sort. And then, like anyone who works on committees, eventually you work your way up to be chairperson. And so, that's what I did. But I found out too, that as I got involved with the committee work, I also had an opportunity to do a lot of networking with ag communicators from across the country. And it was just great to sit down with other ag communicators, talk to them about some of the challenges that we were all facing, whether it was, how to write a better story or dealing with difficult bosses, things of that sort. It was just a great time to sit down and hear what other people were experiencing and sharing those ideas and building those relationships, that I've maintained, over the years. So eventually with AAEA, I got more and more involved with committees. Probably the one assignment that I volunteered to do that probably took me to that next level within the organization was when I was co-chairman of our 75th anniversary. And as you might imagine, it was a ton of work. I was fortunate to have a lot of great committees and committee workers who helped make that a success. But from there, I rose up the ranks with the board, serving as a board member, and then eventually president of the organization. And at that point, it was really gratifying to help, formulate policy, put together strategic plans, help formulate the direction of the organization, and to help, provide better benefits to members, a lot of it around professional improvement, but also to help fund different opportunities for ag communicators that would help them grow both personally and professionally. And for me, along those lines, one of the perks of being the AAEA president was that you receive an expense paid trip to the IFAJ Congress. And I mentioned that earlier to you. That's the organization that represents ag communicators from 55 countries. And one of the neat things about the Congress is that it's always hosted by a different country. The US most recently was hosted in 2020 in Minneapolis, but the year I was president was actually in Germany. And we actually were in a facility that was in the Black Forest in the former East Germany. And we found out the history of this campus. It turned out to be a former Nazi youth camp. So that was interesting in itself. But what really makes the IFAJ experience so great is that you get an opportunity to visit and talk to local farmers, local ag officials and people associated with different agribusinesses. And even better than that, you get to meet journalists, ag communicators from around the world. And so now I've got this great network of contacts that I can lean on if I'm working on a particular story, or, just really good friends. And traveling global or just traveling at all just gives you a better perspective, a deeper perspective and context of agriculture. And it's really helped me become a better writer and a better journalist when I'm looking at stories that we're considering to put in the magazine or on the website, or evaluating trends and issues of importance that I think that are audience will benefit from. So, I've continued to stay involved in AAEA, through the Ag Media Summit, the IFHA Congress, for example, and I guess my only regret is that, I didn't get involved sooner. I've certainly tried hard to get to as many IFHA Congresses as possible. Some of them I paid for myself, and in some instances, my employer has either paid the expenses or partially, but that's how much I value talking to ag communicators and listening to their experiences and learning about different cultures and different ways farmers are making a living around the world. So, if there's anything there, I encourage everyone to get involved. As Becky said, we're all busy. We all have got a lot of things to do, but you really need to get involved with your professional organization like ACE, because the rewards are so great. So related to that, I wanted to visit just a little bit about, since we're all about professional improvement. As I mentioned, as ag communicators, we definitely have a noble profession, but as you know, things have really changed. Certainly in my career, what I do now is far different than what I did when I first started out. I mean, it used to be content just consisted of going out and interview my sources, taking a few photos and writing the story and move on. Today, when I'm doing a story, after the interview, I take a few photos, then I may be shooting a video or recording a podcast. I'm tweeting about it on my social media platforms, posting content, on our website and other platforms. So it's a whole different world out there on how we can not only create our content, but also disseminate it to general audiences, but also target our audiences as well. And to me, that's really exciting. But related to that, wanted to give you kind of my 5 guiding principles or 5 tips that have really helped me throughout my career. And hopefully, I really think these apply to anyone, whether, like I said, you've been in your current role for 2 weeks or you've been in it, 20 years. These are 5 things that have kind of helped me grow both professionally and personally. So in no particular order, number 1, don't be afraid to jump off the cliff. What I mean by that, I was a farm boy raised in Iowa. My first job after graduating from Iowa State in ag journalism was Wallace's Farmer in Iowa. So a couple years on the job, I was presented an opportunity to take a job in St. Louis. So I thought about it long and hard. I mean, I was very comfortable and very happy where I was at. But then I got to thinking, I really need to push the envelope here. I need to get out of my comfort zone. So I loaded all my worldly possessions in my 2-door Malibu and headed down to St. Louis, not knowing a soul. And I tell you, it was probably the best move I ever made, and certainly prompted me to, jump off the cliff many times in my career. So I learned a lot when I first started at that position in St. Louis. 6 months later, my boss left, and lo and behold, I was promoted to editor of a national farm magazine at the ripe old age of 25. So I think about that time I was ready to jump off the cliff again, but I made it, and I've continued to, like I mentioned, jump off the cliff several times to enhance my career. Number 2, pack your suitcase. As ag communicators, we can't do a good job just sitting behind your desk day after day. It doesn't matter what your role is. If you're a graphic artist, if you're a speech writer, if you're working on social media, an editor, photographer. In agriculture in particular, you need to go out to where the action is. And whether that's in your own state, someplace across the US or globally, just getting out and talking to people will certainly give you better context in your work, and also make you a much better, much knowledgeable ag communicator, regardless of what your role is. Number 3, raise your hand. And Becky certainly talked about this, and for all the reasons that I've said, be active in your professional organization like ACE. As I mentioned, you'll be rewarded many, many times over. At the same time, at your workplace, don't be shy, to volunteer for extra projects or maybe something, outside your realm of expertise. Showing that you're a great team member, willing to learn, you'll make some valuable impressions and also make connections that can enhance your career. Number 4, be a curious George. Just like that classic children's book about the inquisitive monkey, don't be complacent. To me, I'm always trying to push myself, learning new skills. If I didn't, I'd be very bored at what I was doing. So I'm always pushing myself to be better, learning those new skills. Like I mentioned earlier, earlier in my career, you would take notes and then write the story and do a couple of photos and be done with it. Now, I know about social media platforms. I do video work. I do podcasts. I do editing, with those videos and podcasts. So I've really expanded my skill set. And to me, that really makes me energized. It makes me want to go to work every day to see what's around the corner, what could happen this week. So I challenge you to challenge yourself to be better. And last but not least, number 5, be a buddy. So there's 2 things here. One, seek out mentors, within your own organization, whether it's at ACE or at your workplace. Then also seek out mentors, outside your industry. For me, they've been extremely valuable to share their knowledge and expertise. I use many of my mentors as a sounding board, and they can bring information to you, bring a different perspective to things. So that's really been helpful. And also they can help you make valuable connections as you network with your mentors. And then secondly, when you're being a buddy, be a mentor yourself. I have so much fun and satisfaction mentoring young ag communicators, talking to them about their dreams, their goals, the challenges they have, and just talking to them and helping them in any way I can to help further their career and make them feel more comfortable and give them that encouragement they need. And of course, mentorship doesn't just include, me talking to young people just starting out. I guess in some way I'm also mentors to others who have been in the industry a long time as well. And again, that goes back to that networking and building those relationships, that really not only help others, but help you as well. So that concludes my top 5. Again, I want to thank everyone at ACE for this wonderful honor of being a Reuben Brigham Award recipient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. That was an especially important message about involvement and continuing to seek out mentorship and connections and networking in a year where we're not all together, but hope to be, will be next year. Your remarks are sustenance to get me and others through to that time when we can look each other in the eye, not through a screen, and shake hands again and enjoy each other's company. So thank you, Greg, for being part of this today. And I'm now going to turn it over to Jennifer for a few remarks before we move into the next portion of the program.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Hillier. Everyone, please join me in congratulating and thanking him one last time. This is the last segment of our conference where we will be all together in a session. So I wanted to offer just a few closing remarks and reminders. We have access to our Hoover conference platform for some period of time following the conference. I believe it's 3 months on the website and 6 months via the app, but there is a note in the general announcements that says, and I would encourage everyone to take the opportunity over the rest of this week to continue to engage with each other there, answer the Q&As that we didn't have a time to get to, start those conversations, build those connections. We packed a lot into these 3 days and didn't leave a whole lot of time, so that app and over the next few days serves as our hallway conversation and our lunch table. Please take advantage of it. Also, please check out the schedule for the learning community meetings. There are several still happening yet this week. And as you've heard many times, that's a way to continue your involvement in ACE throughout the year and talk shop with those who are interested in the same disciplines or topics that you are. And lastly, I just wanted to say one more thank you for the opportunity to serve you this year as your president. I look forward to supporting the organization and La Rochelle in her term as president this coming year. So thank you again, everyone. It will be great to see many of your faces in person next year. And please join me one last time in welcoming and congratulating La Rochelle. And I am officially passing the torch, and for real this time, the gavel, to her. Thank you for joining ACE this week. Take care and enjoy the last couple sessions today.